in the morning. I'm Ceara Gallagher, and I'm hopefully going to just share some of my experiences along my career in speech and language therapy and in other areas, which will hopefully be useful for you this morning. I'm going to just try and see, this did work earlier to bring up my slides. Can everybody see that? Yay, I'm getting, the only person I can see is yourself, Caroline. So if somebody wants to ask a question or or something or comment, if you even put your hand up or put something in the chat, and Caroline or Lorna can link you into me, because that's the one thing I hate about these virtual presentations, is that you can't really see anybody. So I'm going to get started. I've got quite a bit I'd like to share, and what the guys at RCSLT asked me to be part of, and I was delighted to be asked, because I know this is part of a suite of leadership training and opportunities to come together and reflect on leadership. My particular area was to look at internal and external stakeholders, and how we partner with, how do we influence, and how do we get the best out of those relationships. And really what I'm sharing is really from personal experience and some of the education opportunities that I have had in my career. So who am I? Oh, this is great. It's not moving on. There we go. Well, I graduated in 1995 as a speech and language therapist. And you look at that album cover, it just makes me feel so old. It looks so dated. And I graduated in Jordanstown University here in Northern Ireland. And I started work in Southeastern Trust, where I spent my entire clinical career, actually. So I worked there for about 23 years. And I worked in pediatrics, and in particular with children with developmental language disorders. And I loved it. And during my time in Southeastern Trust, the trust had a really strong culture and development within quality improvement. So I worked my qualifications up in that to a level 3 quality improvement fellow during that time. And that has been really quite instrumental in the way I do things in my life now. I would say professionally and also personally as well. And then I had the wonderful opportunity of joining RCSLT, and I worked as head of office for RCSLT in Northern Ireland for 2 years. And again, that was a massive learning curve in terms of stakeholders, and stakeholders who I'd never worked with before. And I had a great opportunity there to develop skills in that area. I then joined the Public Health Agency 2 years ago, and I'm an AHP consultant there in Northern Ireland. So that little arrow shows you Northern Ireland on the map and pointing to where I live and where I work, which is that little kind of purpley bit in the middle, which is Belfast. You can probably tell from my accent anyway. Okay, so stakeholders, who are they? It'll depend, won't it? It depends for you where you work. It depends on the areas you work in, and stakeholders will vary. But it's really important to consider them. So I just thought maybe in the chat, if you could pop in there, or if anybody's brave enough to speak, to talk about who you think, first of all, your internal stakeholders are. Anybody brave enough to share? Maybe putting things in the chat, and Caroline can keep me posted because I can't see. Um, Internal stakeholders are those that are very much usually within your sphere of influence. So that could be your staff. Oh, there's a hand up, Caroline.
Yeah, we've got a comment in the chat from Anne Milligan, who says other service groups in the health board.
Yeah, absolutely. So your internal is who you're linking with on a regular basis. It could be your staff, it could be, as you say, with your board, with your own line management. It's also your service users as well. within that space. Or if you work in education, in language units, then your internal stakeholders will be education staff as well. So it's not always HSC who are within that sphere. In terms of external stakeholders, can you have a think about who they might be? And sometimes these are the stakeholders that are maybe more difficult to engage with because they might be outside of your control, in terms of your circles of control. Who might they be? Give you a few minutes to have a think. There's a few ideas on this slide. Caroline?
Yeah, we've got a couple of answers in the chat. Local authority colleagues, schools, LEA commissioners, and someone else has said local authorities.
Perfect. And those integrated care systems, absolutely. In
Uh,
terms of that. Hmm.
Parent carer groups and charities as well, Lynn Humphrey has
Yeah.
said.
Perfect, in your third sector. So people that we can't directly sort of govern, or so they're the ones that actually I would probably find the most challenging during my career. I don't know if that's something you have felt as well, about how you develop those relationships, and how you can work together to serve their agenda and your own. So there's loads of tools out there. You might have your own preference, but I have to say, if you're struggling to think about your internal and your external stakeholders, it's a great thing to do yourself and do with your teams, as well, to have a think about that. And I love the stakeholder grid. It's just, it's very well known because it talks about, who you need to actively consult with or work with, who you need to regularly engage with, who do you just need to keep informed, and who do you just need to maintain interest in. And I would use that stakeholder grid for my general work, but also if I'm working on a specific project or piece of work, about how we successfully make sure that everybody is around the table. Because as you know, we don't work in discrete systems. Everything is interlinked, and it's really important to consider. So that one is an example of a regional falls and care homes project that I was recently involved with. And it was something that the steering group got together and started to populate. I have to say, when we started the project, there weren't that, well, not that there weren't that many. We added to it as we went through, because as you know, when you start in a new area of work, on a new project, you start to build up relationships, and people connect you to other people who are going to be useful, in driving change, or delivering better services, for the people that we work for and with. I think it's really important to think about your circle of control, because whilst we have our stakeholders, some of those we can absolutely have really easy influence, and others we don't. That doesn't mean we still can't influence, but it's really important that we identify. So, for example, people talked about third sector. So that would be something that's maybe outside of our control, in terms of they're not delivering to your corporate plans, they're not part of that, your organizational business. But it's still really important about how we kind of influence them. So it's important to think about your circles of control, and then thinking about how you influence. And hopefully in the rest of this presentation, I'll share with you what I feel has really helped me. So you may have seen this before. I love this picture. Can people say, when they look at the picture in the chat, what they see? Do they see an old lady or a young lady?
Got a real mix coming through. Some people saying they can see both. But yeah, and
Ooh.
then I'd say it's probably 50-50, or maybe more seeing the young lady actually now.
Is there anybody, and you're absolutely right, they are both here. Well done. There's some very perceptive people out there. Give yourself a gold star for this morning. Is there anybody on the call this morning that can't see both of them? And there usually are.
Yeah, I'll put my hand up. I can only see the young lady. Can't see the old lady.
Okay, so can you see my cursor?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so this is the young lady's eyelash, her cheekbone going into her chin. Okay, so that's the young lady and her ear, and it's a side profile. This is her hair and her lovely feather. The old lady is a bigger face. So the young lady's ear is actually the eye of the old lady. This is the nostril and the nose of the old lady. And this is her chin and her mouth. Okay. So once it's pointed out, you can see both.
Oh, I think we've lost Ceara. Oh
We
no.
lost her. I'm sure she'll be back. She's just pausing for dramatic effect.
Feel the pressure to like tell a joke or something now.
Oh dear. Is that useful so far? For those of you on the call? Yeah, that's good.
Are the slides available after the presentation? Is she going to share them?
Yeah, we can share them. That's no problem.
That would be great, thank you.
Yeah, I think the frameworks are quite helpful, aren't they, to think about how you could use those. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't write it down so quick enough there, so that'd be great if you could share them. Thank you.
I'm just see if I've got her number. Have you got her number, Caroline?
I'll have a look.
Oh, she's back.
Hooray.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
You're back,
My
Ceara.
I'm really sorry. Sometimes these servers just literally drop off. So that's what happened. And I didn't realize for a while. And I was talking away to myself.
Oh no. So what was the last thing that this is a test now of memory? What was the last thing that Ceara said? So we can help her get back to, can you remember, Caroline? I know we were talking about the
just pointing out
picture. The picture.
Yeah, the young lady and the old lady, and saying that once somebody points it out to you, you can see it. I think that's the last thing.
Exactly. Right. I'm just going to try and get these slides back up again. For some reason, it's not playing ball.
And Ceara, people were asking if you could share the slides afterwards, and we said that would be okay if that's all right with you.
Of course, I've already sent them to Caroline and Lorna, so that's no problem at all. I don't know why I'm having problems with send no files available. Sorry, Lorna, would you mind bringing them up?
Yeah, of course.
So we were just talking about, while I was talking to myself, about the importance of perspective. And we do see things from our own perspective and where we're coming from and what we feel is important. But somebody else is also thinking the same thing and maybe from a slightly different angle. So next slide, please, Lorna. Thank you. And the reason why it's so important is because we work as part of a system. So if we're working with a child and you know you're part of a massive team, it's about you as the manager will see something, you as the lead will see something from your perspective, or indeed the parent or the child themselves and you know your therapists who are working with them, or going bigger. If you're working within that system of working with boards and integrated care systems and third sector, they'll all see it from their own perspective. But it's by bringing all those perspectives together is how we can really influence and make change in the system. Next slide, please, Lorna. This is where I realized that nobody was there. So what do you see when you read this? And if you could pop it into the chat. And I can see that some people are saying they saw one thing the first time when they immediately looked at it and then it changed. And I do love this one. Opportunity is now here or opportunity is nowhere. And again, this is this idea of sometimes when we come to something and into a sphere of work is that again, we can see things initially just in one way. But again, it's about that reflection and sometimes stepping back that we see things in a different perspective as well. So thank you for that. Next slide, Lorna. Oh, sorry, go back one. So relationships, what do you think is important in building a relationship? And again, just pop any of the attributes you think are important into the chat. Because for me, if this is my transparency, mutual respect, fantastic. Communication, trust, openness and honesty. Someone's been reading my slides. Trust is so important, isn't it? Yeah, understanding of roles, absolutely. Next slide, please, Lorna. And all of those things are absolutely critical, aren't they? And if there's anything you take away from today, this is my complete go-to and epiphany at one point in my job along the career I've had, that I just went, it is all about relationships. Everything. Doesn't matter when I went to RCSLT and I was panicking about how I was going to work with people, you know, in Stormont and government when they're there. You know, it's about relationships. It is fundamental in terms of influencing and working and getting the best out of our system and with our stakeholders. These are just some of the things that I popped in and you've brought them up. The openness, the transparency, that honesty, being authentic, being compassionate, bringing kindness into the workspace, being trusting and being trusted. Listen and listen with fascination. You know, it's a bit like those slides I showed earlier about we see things from, you know, or we hear things, but do we really? Sometimes we're still listening to our own perspective while somebody else is giving us another one. So listen with fascination is so important. Next slide, please, Lorna. And if we think about our internal stakeholders, I'm particularly thinking about your teams. What is your team like? Is it a happy team? Is it a team where people come to work with a spring in their step? I know in the current circumstances, it's a really challenging place to be out in the front line and working as a speech and language therapist. But do they feel that they're contributing and that they're part of team and they're part of that process? And high performing teams are really important. And I love this picture of, for those who are too young, that's the A team, by the way, on the left, in case people don't know who they are. Have you got your A team? Who's in your car? In terms of your stakeholders. Maybe some people aren't in the car, maybe some people are refusing to get in, or maybe they're in there and they're part of that journey. Next slide, please, Lorna. And we all come with our own particular set of skills, don't we? And there's our Liam Neeson from Northern Ireland. And we all have our own particular set of skills. And yes, we can develop and we can, you know, work on the things that maybe don't come naturally to us. But there's things that we bring, and you know your teams and your stakeholders, and they have particular skill sets. And that's important to identify so that you can build to them to the fullest. So next slide, please, Lorna. And I don't know if you're aware of Belbin. People know Myers-Briggs and those types of kind of personality analysis, but they're individual analysis. I would really recommend Belbin if you want to look at your teams and in terms of really valuing the skill set that you have, and that diversity is so important. If you've got a team full of people who just love data and are task and finishers, it's not great. It really isn't great. You need that diversity. You need those people with the key ideas, the plants. You need those people who are implementers. You need those people who are shapers. And this is a fantastic tool where you can do it with your team and you can identify who you are within that. And I remember when I did that with a team that had just recently merged. I'm trying to remember what I was. I think I was the shaper. So my particular skill set was really about building networks. I do find that easy to do. And whereas my line manager was a brilliant completer, finisher, had the detail and always delivered. Sometimes I was the big picture and didn't always. I was away doing something else and that shiny thing. So it's about that sort of culture in your team and bring that together to really influence and play to your strengths as well in your teams. Next slide, Lorna. So this next section is all about collective leadership. Have you heard about collective leadership? It's massive in Northern Ireland and we have strategies on it. And if you're interested in collective leadership, I would recommend the Collective Leadership book by Mike West, or indeed anything by Mike West. He's loads of blogs and information on the King's Fund website, and he's fantastic. But I found this quite interesting. This is 2014, and I think that's what scared me. Within the NHS, we're facing bigger challenges than ever, and leaders must ensure that cultures within health organisations sustain high quality, compassionate, and ever improving care. And key to that shaping these cultures is leadership. And flick on to now, 2023, the challenges are even greater. They're even greater, and our ability to flex, be agile, and to transform and to deliver is even more as a leader key. As it's key. But if you wouldn't mind in the chat, could you pop in what you think collective leadership means to you? Being jointly accountable, yeah. Leadership at every level, being on the same page, absolutely. All working together to the same end, absolutely. That joint purpose. All members of the team contributing, yep. Shared focus, fantastic. Some people have obviously are aware and appreciate the core elements of collective leadership. Thank you so much for popping in. And some of the things that you brought up there are really what it means to me in nuggets, which is that shared purpose, and it's about leadership at all levels would be the two things that would really strike me. I just finished a PG cert in collective leadership here in Northern Ireland, and it was the first of its kind here, and it was just for AHPs. But funny, feedback I gave them was collective leadership shouldn't just be AHPs if we really want to work together. So the next cohorts are going to be with our nursing colleagues. And I think that's really important that we are moving forward in that way. Next slide, please, Lorna. So collective leadership, why is it important? It's really important in terms of our influencing of our internal and external stakeholders. So it's influence, it's culture, it's the power relations, and it's strategy, plus all of those other things and more that you already brought up. Next slide, please, Caroline. Or Lorna. I love this. If you want a really easy, inspirational book to read about leadership, I thoroughly recommend James Kerr's Legacy. It's really easy to read. It's short chapters, and it's just so relatable. And he actually followed the All Blacks, the rugby team, and he wanted to work out how were they so high performing. It's a fantastic book, and this is one of the things he talked about, and it always has stayed with me. This is collected. Of course I can, Anne. It's James Kerr, Kerr, and the book is called Legacy. So you're welcome, Anne. So this to me is collective leadership. Oh, thanks, my goodness, Caroline, you're fast. This is collective leadership in action. So these birds are flying and migrating. They know where they're going, so they're on the same page. They have that common purpose. They know what they're going to be going to and how. And there is a leader at the pinnacle, and they're following, and they want to follow that leader. But the important thing about birds when they go on these long journeys is that leader doesn't stay there, because he does get tired, and that bird goes to the back of the line and the next bird steps up. And that's collective leadership at all levels. Next slide, please, Lorna. We can't push people up the mountain. It's not going to happen. We need to be that leader that inspires, that grows people, and that is the leader that they want to follow. And that's really important, because then they'll reach out. So think about your teams, and sometimes we can have difficult relationships, maybe with some members, where it can feel really difficult in order to work together. But I honestly believe through a real compassionate collective leadership approach, and seeing from their perspective, it still can be achieved. Next slide, please, Lorna. I remember I had a fantastic presentation from a chief executive in a trust in England, and he talked about what made the difference for their organisation to be so high performing. And he said, it's like this. He said, do you put fire under the feet of the people you're working with, or do you put fire within their belly? And that really stayed with me. And in terms of if we can have people coming in with that fire in their belly and they feel valued and part of that joint effort and part of the success, then you will have the most incredible services and relationships. Sometimes, and I'm not saying that leadership is all about this nice. Sometimes we have to, as managers, bring in our governance and our policies and all of that, and that's important. But it's important to have that balance as well, in terms of achieving the best relationships with our stakeholders within and without. Next slide, please, Lorna. Okay, this is also so important, isn't it, in terms of working with particularly, I would say, external, but also our internal stakeholders. Is our work co-produced? I go a step further, because I think co-production is a little bit misunderstood sometimes, where you go, here's a new procedure or document, what do you think about it? And you just ask for feedback. That's not co-production, really. Co-design is where you start with the blank page. So you get your key stakeholders around and you plan it together. And certainly within the Falls project that I was involved with, we didn't decide our aim, we didn't decide what the product or the pathway was going to look like until we had everybody around the table and we listened to what they wanted and synthesized that together. Because otherwise we'll end up like Cinderella here in The Ugly Sister, where we think we've got a gorgeous glass slipper that we have developed with all of our expertise, but it doesn't fit the system or it doesn't fit the stakeholder that you're trying to work with. And then click again, Lorna. But with co-design and co-production, you get that perfect fit. And it's something that will be co-owned as well, which is so important. Next slide, please, Lorna. I don't know if you're aware of Myron's maxims. We had the pleasure of having a masterclass with him during the postgrad collective leadership course. And I think these are really important to influencing and working with our stakeholders, particularly the two that I've highlighted there in yellow. People own what they help create. So if you're trying to influence, particularly those who are outside of your control, if they're not with you and they're not part of that creation, they're not going to own it. It just won't happen. And you've got to connect the system to more of itself. And that's where it's so important to dig out, to search out all of those stakeholders who need to be there to make your system work and live. Next slide, please. I'm sure you know this quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I love it. But I go one step further. Values and behaviours eat culture for dinner. So what creates a culture? It's our values and it's our behaviours. are so important. And you put those in the slide about what makes a really good relationship earlier on. You talked about openness, you talked about honesty, and those sorts of really key values. But it's one thing having that value as a leader, but are we living it? Are we showing that in our own behaviours with those that we work with? And that's sometimes I do well, sometimes I don't. And we always have to keep ourselves in check with that, because our values and our behaviours will build the relationships, which will then develop and the stakeholders that we have and deliver to our targets and what we're needing to achieve. Next slide, please, Lorna. These are the HSE's values and behaviours here in Northern Ireland. Delighted to say that these are regional, so every single trust has the same values, excuse me, and behaviours, which is really important. It's working together. It's about excellence, absolutely. It's openness and honesty, and it's about compassion. And underpinning on these values, there are behaviours, and that's what we all must do in our work, is work to these and show them in what we're doing. Compassion is really important, and compassionate leadership, some people think, oh, that's just, being kind all the time, which absolutely that is so important. But sometimes compassionate leadership is about having that crucial conversation. So compassionate leadership is about seeing someone who's struggling, or somebody who's coming to late work every day. Why? You have to have those difficult, challenging conversations in order to have that supportive way of moving that forward as well. So it's sometimes the hard things as well as the kindness as well. Next slide, please, Lorna. Compassionate leadership starts with yourself. What's your self-care like? You're not going to be able to influence anybody in a positive way if you don't look after yourself. And as leaders in our HSE now in the NHS, it's so difficult, isn't it? We've come out of COVID, but we're still in that reactive, we need it yesterday mode. We're dealing with staff retention, recruitment issues, the fallout of COVID on our service users, so many things. But how are you? You must check in with yourself. How are you as a leader? I've used this quite a lot when I was managing staff, but I use it with myself too. So when you come in the morning, where are you on that tree? And it's important to check in with yourself and try to get that work-life balance, because if you don't get that, you will not be able to be the leader you want to be in your work. What are your golf balls that go into the jar? It's important to think about, my golf balls are my family, my work, and my singing, and you think about the balance of those, because if one gets squeezed, it has a knock-on effect to the others. So check in with yourself, check in with your team, check in with those that you're working with as well. Zoom, I think, has made influencing easier in that it's more accessible to get to our stakeholders, but in some ways there's a disconnect, isn't there, because it's virtual. So start your Zoom meeting with, how are you? How are you getting on? I have a terrible memory, so when I start and I meet somebody for the first time, I start to build up who they are as a person. So they'll drop into the conversation, oh, I had to leave, I got a child off sick today, so I know they've got a child. So the next time I make that call, how's your child doing? How are you getting on? Check in and make those human connections as well as really important. Next slide, Lorna. Another really important thing I've learned is emotional intelligence, and how that helps us to influence our stakeholders, both internally and externally. I talked earlier about everybody has key sets of skills, and I think we also have our own kind of sort of, what would you say, our own way that we like to do our work, or what really sings to us. And it's really important to try and work out, whoever you're working with, what sings to them, what makes them tick. For some people, it's the stories. It's talking about the narrative around things. It's about that what matters piece. What difference is it going to make for that person? It's the patient's stories. It's those sorts of pieces that really are most important to the person that you're trying to work with and influence. For other people, it's data. They love it. Give me more, show me the outcome, let me see it, let me visually see what you're doing. What is the agenda and portfolio of the person you're working with? So if, say, for example, you're working with the Public Health Agency, if that's something that you're doing in your work, you know, what is their portfolio? What are they delivering to? What is their planning and performance? Because sometimes that's how you get a wee nudge in the door open. So if you know somebody in the Public Health Agency who's working on wider determinants of children's health and population health, then you might know, actually, I can help deliver to that in terms of, you know, talking to your bump, you know, or those sorts of things. So you start to deliver into somebody else's agenda and what they're trying to deliver, and you nudge the door open. Some people, as I say, love data. Some people love patient stories, but really, next slide, it's about trying to bring that together as well in terms of really trying to influence. I'm a big believer in visuals. I hate long, lengthy policies, strategies that, you know, are 90 pages long that nobody's going to read. You know, it's about brief and getting to the nuggets of information. When we send information on to our stakeholders, they may not even read it if it's really long. Sometimes they'll only get to the executive summary. So think about, when you're influencing, about the quantity of information that you send and the way that's presented, as well, is really important when we're trying to influence. Try to be succinct when you're doing that, and think about how it feels to you when you receive a briefing paper which isn't so brief. It's about getting to the nuggets when we're trying to influence. And next slide, please. Don't worry, there's not that many more. The other thing I would say is instrumental in what I have learned in terms of influencing and working with our stakeholders is quality improvement, learning and experience. And if you get the chance to do, or maybe already have had the opportunity to train in quality improvement, I would absolutely say grab it, because actually quality improvement and collective leadership and influencing go hand in hand, glove in glove. It's a way of doing things, and anytime I meet new people, this is always where I start. Quality improvement talks about understanding your system. Start with understanding your system, use your stakeholder grids, listen to people, listen again, find out what's important to them, and don't move and don't do anything until you've done that. Because otherwise what you'll do is you'll just bring your perspective in, and what you want to do, and trying to push that on other people. And as we know, that really doesn't work. We need to get that shared purpose, that common vision. And then what will flow out from that naturally will be your aim, your measures, your outcome, and your outcomes will deliver if you do it in that way. And you know, outcome-based accountability is really important, but it's how we get to that accountability in terms of always going back to that co-production, co-design, understanding your system as well. When I started the regional Falls project, I was terrified. I was 2 weeks into my new job. I'd been a paediatric speech and language therapist, and I was told that I was co-chair and QI lead for this regional project in care homes for Falls. And I could write in a postage stamp what I knew about that. So I just took a breath and went, I'm going to go back to collective leadership. I'm going to go back to my quality improvement framework. And that's how we developed that project. And the outcomes were amazing. We had 33% reduction in falls across the 18 pilot care homes. We had 37% reduction in NIAS, that's our ambulance service call-outs. And that was only achieved because we had everybody around the system part of it and co-owned. Next slide, please, Lorna. So I'm coming to the end of my presentation to leave us some time, and I hope we really engage in some really good conversation following this. What have I learned? When I started as a speech and language therapist in 1995, I think I was pretending to be a speech and language therapist, and I don't mean in terms of my skills, but I was, you know, wearing, this is before uniforms came in, I was wearing sensible clothes, which I borrowed from my mother because I didn't have any. You know, I was, you know, I'm professional, and I was afraid to bring me. I was afraid to bring me. And I think that's really important. And people know when you're not being authentic. They know when you're being guarded, and they know when you're not being true to yourself. So I'm a mummy, and I've two gorgeous boys, and I'm a singer, and that's a big part of my life. Um, I I've just got really brave about just being me, and also saying when I don't know. You know, so when I'm in a meeting, even like with like working with, you know, the chief nursing officer, I'll say, sorry, I don't know what that acronym means. Sorry, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Whereas the Ceara in 1995 would have sat there and just gone, oh my goodness, got onto Google, which wasn't even there then. What does that mean? What does that mean? Just ask, because there's somebody around that table who also doesn't know. And they really appreciate that you can have that. Okan, thank you so much. And I think we all go into our jobs sometimes at the start feeling like an imposter, you know, the good old imposter syndrome. But everybody feels that. And as a leader, sometimes when you start a new job as a leader and you move up to your band 7 or wherever you are in your career, you kind of go, how did I get here? I'm not good enough to be here. I don't know what I'm doing. That's okay. And that's how everybody feels. But it's what we do with that is important, and just be authentic. I mean, when I started in the PHA and I was at a commissioners meeting, and they were talking away again about you know, again, they were just talking about commission and stuff, and I just went, sorry, can I just stop you all there? And it was only my second meeting with them, and you could see the chair looking at me, go, oh, oh. And I said, look, I'm just feeling a wee bit like Princess Jasmine from Aladdin, and I went, a whole new world, they all just started laughing, you know, and again they went, oh right, okay, look, listen, this is what this means, and do you know what? I have the best relationships because I started like that. I started like that. I was open. I was honest. I, you know, told them, oh yeah, I'm a bit of a singer and you know, bit of crack, whatever. You know, and it's just really important because we're all just people and we're all just trying to do our best. And it's just great when you can be really honest. There. Next slide, please, Lorna. This is the other nugget. Which I think is so important as a leader. I love Maya. I just love all of her work. I've learned that people will forget what you've said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So that is so important. And collective leadership, compassionate leadership, all of the things I've talked about in building relationships and being genuine, this is the important bit. Because if I'm a vulnerable, authentic leader, people will feel that, and they will also have that honest conversation with me and hopefully know that the door is open and I'm not going to judge. And you know that yourself. If you think back to teachers that you had at school, you can't remember a thing that they taught you, really. You don't remember what they've said, but do you remember what and how they made you feel? 100%. You know those teachers that made you feel like that, and those that made you feel like a giant, and how you did better in those classes, how those leaders made you feel, massive to how you then deliver. Next slide, please, Lorna. And this is something I have had to learn the hard way. You can probably tell I'm really passionate. I'm like go, 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 of loads of energy. And I have learned to be a really good leader and to influence is to go slower. I can go really fast and then I look around and there's nobody around me. I've left them all. They don't know what's going on. Someone mentioned communication earlier, checking in with your stakeholders, so that, you know, if you want to go fast, go alone. That's not great. If you want to go far, you go together. And that is something I have to continually check myself on. But with collective leadership, I've got much better with it. Next slide, please. So you'll be glad to hear I have come to the end. I hope you've been able to understand my Belfast accent. And if we stop sharing and get all you lovely faces back on the screen, that would be great. Now, there we go. So I know I saw some of the chat coming in, and I could see that some things, were really resonating with people. Would anybody like to sort of start the discussion or some of the reflections that they've had on that, just to get some conversation going? Just put your hand up or on mute. Anne.
I would like to ask 1,000 questions, but I will try and rein it in a little bit. What an amazing presentation. Thank you so much. I feel really inspired and encouraged, and a lot of what you said really resonated deeply with me as a leader. On a practical level, one of the things I'd just really like to pick your brains about is in terms of collective leadership. And reflecting on my own practice, I know I leap too far ahead and I don't allow my stakeholders to be involved at that design level. I'm one for taking my ideas and saying, what do you all think? Is there a structure or a format you follow for that co-design aspect? Because I think one of my fears is that too many cooks spoil the broth. And how do you actually get anything done with all of those probably quite strongly opinionated leaders who all want something from this? Do you have sort of a structure, a template for that kind of conversation?
And really good questions there, and I hear you because I've been there. And sometimes isn't it in the system where people need things yesterday, and you think I don't have time to go and to get all these stakeholders together. But the problem with that is you will get something, but it won't be co-owned and it won't be as good as it could be. So it's for me, and this was hard. So when I first, to give you an example of the Falls project, I was told what the aim was and told to develop this pathway and told it had to be done within a set amount of time. And the first thing I had to do as a leader was do a bit of pushback with the people who were putting that pressure on me. And so I would say that's the first thing I do. So I would have been saying, okay, first of all, that's not the aim. The aim is about making things better for the resident in the care home. And so a driver diagram is really helpful in terms of a template about how you start to do that co-design and try to share that with others. And the other thing is to take that time. So I would really encourage, I don't know, Anne, have you done any quality improvement training?
Only sort of in-house, nothing particularly significant. So that's probably a good place for me to start, perhaps.
100%. There's a brilliant Scottish level 3. I would really say it's brilliant. It's called the skills training for a leader. I think it's absolutely crucial because for me that gives you the templates and that gives you the that order in the way you start to work on something to get that co-design. So you might have remembered in one of the earlier slides, I don't know, Lorna, if you could maybe find it. It's the one with the heart picture and the two sort of, the data pictures, the run charts. Because one of the things, and this is a really important one. Everyone says, oh, you've got to listen, you've got to talk, you've got to engage your service users, and you do. But there is a bit of a danger in that as well, in that sometimes what some people will bring you forward isn't always the best way to move forward. But it's how you manage that and how you listen to that, and get the balance is an important thing. So I always, in my understand the system, I do a lot of reading, I do a lot of benchmarking. Twitter is brilliant. Has anybody else done this? Reach out. I also do a lot of service user engagement. I do surveys. You don't have to do SurveyMonkey. If you've got Teams, you can do them for free and they're really easy on Microsoft Office. I do workshops. I do interviews. I do all of that. And then from that, then Lorna, can you bring up that particular slide for me? Because what I do with that, Anne, is, and this is another template to try and hone down what you actually then work on. You get your critical few. I don't know if you've heard of a Pareto chart. It's just coming up here. Oh, I know it looks really tiny, but it's this thing here. Yeah, it's this one here with the purple and the blue. Oh, just back, Lorna. Okay, so this one here is a Pareto chart, and this gives you another template, Anne. So I know it's really hard to see in this one, but this is another project I worked on with a preschool special needs team. And a Pareto chart helps you to identify the critical few. So once you synthesize, theme all of the information, it helps you to identify what you need to work on and start with. So to give you an analogy, you were and I know we've got men and women on the, and I don't want to be too sexist, but I would say it's the same for men as well. But we were 20% of our shoes 80% of the time. Okay, so there's your critical few. So this is the critical few. This chart, actually, the template, when you do it in Excel, actually brings the 80% and draws the line. So these are the things that you need to work on. Okay, so within this one, it was a policy and procedure, a care pathway, a patient story booklet, self-management. They were just the things that the team and the stakeholders wanted, and the parents as well. So I hope that helps. You can stop sharing now, Lorna.
Thank you for taking the time to answer.
No
That's
problem.
really helpful.
Hannah. I'm sorry if somebody else had their hand up. I'm just...
Hi, Ceara. Good morning. Thanks
Good morning.
a million for that presentation, Ceara. I thought it was absolutely, well, it just was very powerful, and your whole approach to it was admirable. My question, I suppose, is around where there are stakeholders and there's competing demands, you know, or perhaps lack of motivation. Have you any sort of top tips or strategies to sort of bring them with you to keep on going and to drive that forward, where perhaps they are feeling stressed, overwhelmed, maybe they don't feel it's as important as you do, or perhaps there's just general lack of motivation?
Really good question, because at the moment, our staff and the whole system needs hope, doesn't it? It just feels like a lot of people are feeling weary. We've come out of COVID, we're absolutely weary, and things don't seem to be getting any easier. So what I would say, Hannah, is that I think it's about going back to the birds flying in the V. So where are people flying in your team and your stakeholders? Check in. What matters to you? Use liberating structures. I don't know if you know that. Again, another fabulous course to get on as a way of harnessing and hearing where people are. Because sometimes there's the corridor conversations as a leader where people sometimes don't actually say when you do check in with them about where they are. So liberating structures are fabulous. I would also use visuals. So I have like a big resource of photographs. So things like balloons, you know, kites, storms, you know, all of that sort of stuff. And I literally put them all, like about 100 of them, and put them all around the floor in the meeting room. And I would say, go and find the picture that resonates to how you feel right now. Okay, and they'll all scurry around. You put them up on the wall, and then I'll say, go and find the picture where you'd like to be. And then they'll go and they'll scurry again, and they'll come back, and then you can go, right, okay, so this is where we are now. And you'll get a mix. So you'll get those people who are early adopters and really enthusiastic, and you'll see that other people are feeling. So sometimes the visual will work, and then take a picture, and then start to think, well, how can we get to here? What is it we need to do to move to here? And I would get the blobby tree out. What is our vision? Okay, we've got a corporate plan, but what is our team vision? What is it? So go back to your vision, go back to your shared purpose, decide that together, and think about your Belbin. You're brilliant, Jane, at doing this. Great, you can do that. And really motivate them and give them that hope again. And then come back and check in, say 6 months' time, and go, how are we now? Have we, you know, what picture now resonates? And then when you get to that final, it's the most amazing feeling for the team to know they've got there. Hope that helps.
It does. Thanks a million.
Any other questions? Nope. Brilliant. And I see somebody else put in some great resources, I think, in Scotland as well, in case you missed that, to do with collective leadership. But I really want to commend RCSLT and they've been doing it for a long time now in terms of leadership, and valuing leadership and providing that direction and a space to come together. And that's the other thing, I think, as leaders, isn't it? It's lovely to come and just have some time to reflect, rather than jumping from one Zoom meeting to the next and the next piece you've got to do. And just, I really commend RCSLT for giving a space to you as leaders to actually stop stop and have a think. Are you going too fast? Are people with you? How's your team? Are you being a collective leader? And you know, your values and your behaviors. You know, it's really important to stop and to have a think, because otherwise you'll be working and going really fast, but are you going together? And going together is much more impactful. So thank you so much for the opportunity today. I've really enjoyed it myself. It gives me time to kind of, and even doing my presentation, it was really lovely to bring together all the things that make me buzz. So lovely to meet you all, and good luck in your day ahead, and just keep going.
Thanks so much, Ceara. That was amazing. Really, really fantastic. Thank you. Lots of helpful tips and really excellent presentation of how to take things forward. And thanks for your brilliant sharing of that leadership skills and the skills you've developed. I think you know, really useful, and great that we can video this, because I think lots of people will find this very helpful. So I'm aware there are some leadership events coming up, so I may well nudge people towards you if that's okay.
Absolutely. Right. It's lovely to be able to share. I'm sorry about the gap in the middle, Caroline and Lorna, for your recording, but I don't know if you can splice that together, or but thank you so much.
All right, take care now. All the best.
Bye, everybody.
And everyone have a lovely day. Take care.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Everyone.